Today in the bunker, we're going to do a Halloween build with a possessed or demonic tree suitable for, well, any place you'd need a possessed or demonic tree. Alright, at this stage, this is entirely uncharted waters for anything I've ever done. I've never worked with these materials. Aluminum sculpting wire. I've taken some thin gauge steel wire to wrap around here to try to strengthen that until I can put the tinfoil on. So we're going to get that and start adding some bulk to this. To make it a bit easier to work with this, to wrap it on, I'm just tearing it in strips. Not sure how well that's going to work. We're going to give it a shot. There's a piece I've already put on there. So we'll just continue to wrap this on and bulk it out. And I will continue to make a horrid mess of this. After a bit of creative twisting and bending and scrunching, that's what I've ended up with. Nominally, this is going to be the front. I'll make little bunny ears about that. This will be the front of the tree, and there'll be some features on there. So we will go ahead and get some of our Sculpey rolled out and see if we can't start putting some on this. To do the majority of the outer modeling, I'm going to use this Sculpey 3. Never worked with it before, so this ought to be an adventure. Since I don't have a pasta roller, I have to try and squeeze this out. I've just got some baking parchment, and I'm just using a round shape to try and roll this thin. So I'm using a kind of a spatula-like tool to sort of smooth this out. Because when I press it down on there, of course, it gets all full of my fingerprints. But with this, you just smooth it out, and I'm going to do that to all of the pieces as I lay them on, and then we'll go back and add texture to it. So I'm going to start working with a little bit smaller pieces. I'd rather lay a bunch of small, thinner pieces on there than try to deal with larger, thick pieces. Well, I'm making better progress than I thought I would. The nice thing about this Sculpey 3, unlike the Sculpey that I had used years and years ago, this stuff is much softer, so I don't even need to use the baking paper to thin it out. I just use smaller pieces and then just squeeze it thin and apply it to the model and then smooth it out with this spatula tool. And most of a pack of Sculpey 3 later, I've got the basic shape roughed out. We're going to start adding some bark-like texture to this. I've got the places where the eyes and the mouth will be, and we'll see about putting some texture on. Putting on the texture, I'm just basically using this. It's a plastic, kind of almost a dental pick sort of tool, kind of a stylus, and you don't have to press very hard. Just get down in there. This stuff is almost like working with cream cheese. As long as you take that into account as a medium, it's pretty forgiving. Alright, after many scrapings with the tool, I now have a bark-like texture pretty much all over this. So we're going to let that set for a bit, and then we'll put that in the oven and bake it. Here it is after baking. It didn't come out too bad. Most of my details stayed fairly sharp, and the nice thing is the little bits that came up when I was scraping actually now just kind of, if you rub them, they just sort of fall off. So those aren't anything to worry about. I can see there's a couple of spots I missed, but we can fix that, I believe. So now what we're going to do is add some details. I'm going to try to mix up some green stuff. I hope this stuff works. It's pretty old, so I couldn't find my good tube of it, as usual, but you can probably tell my work area is kind of a nightmare. So we're going to work with what we have. What I've done is cut away well, if I could get off of there. Where it actually joined, I cut that portion away, and because it was oddly uneven, I cut away even portions. So we're going to try to mix this. It may take a while. This stuff is pretty tough. I'm just taking small pieces of that green putty and rolling it out into sort of a cone shape. I'm sort of building up some teeth. I'm going to add the outer edge of the mouth on here. I may do some bottom teeth. This green stuff is not the greatest to work with because of its age, so I'm hoping this will even stick in there, but we'll press on. I'm just using a little bit of water on these sculpting tools and proving what a terrible sculptor I am. We're just going to smooth this out as best we can and try to make some semi-coherent shapes out of it. To do the eyes, I picked out two that were kind of a pinky purple color with a slit iris to give them more of an alien look. It'll probably look dumb, but that's fine. We're going to put it together anyway. Alright, well, doesn't look as silly as I thought it might. But the eye sockets came up pretty good. I just rolled a little sausage of the green stuff, put that around the eye, and then just blended it in so that it would stick. Same thing with the outer edges of the mouth. I just rolled like a little sausage and pressed it up in there and then blended it as best I could. So we're going to put that aside and let that dry so that we'll be ready to prime it. I'm going to have to tape over the eyes when I prime that. That's the only kind of annoying part, but I couldn't think of a way to do it where I could get all of this blended in correctly and not have them already in there. Since I had a little bit of green stuff left over, I took some and made some peculiar sort of fungus that grows on trees. It kind of comes out. You'll see when we glue it on, but I made several of those, and then just to use up some more green stuff, I made a couple of these little larva things. They're not going to go for this build, but I just didn't want to waste the green stuff. It took me so long to mix. So we're going to let this firm up overnight, and then in the morning we will paint it. Alright, that's cured overnight, so that's good and firmed up. I'm going to cut a base, and we'll go ahead and mount this with some hot glue, and then we're going to add probably some sand and whatnot for texture, and then we'll get ready to prime. As a base, I took some mat board, but you could use chipboard or whatever, and put some sanding sealer on it. You could just paint it, you could use Mod Podge, whatever, just to kind of seal it. This will help keep it from warping when we glue the sand and other texture on here. But numerous ways to do that. Now what I've done to glue this down, I put some on the bottom and kind of sat him on the base where I wanted him, and then went around and just hit the seams with some hot glue, and it's not a problem that that's going to be there. We can texture over that, but I wanted to give it a good firm foundation and a good grip. With the ground cover laid down, I'm going to let that glue dry. I've also gone ahead and taken some painter's tape and taped over the eyes, because when I prime this, I don't want to get that on the eyes. I'm going to have to touch up around the eyelids because I just didn't have the patience to try and cut those little circles or ovoids or whatever out. They're sort of like non-Euclidean geometry, so I don't want to deal with it. I'll just touch it up. Anyway, the ground cover will take a little bit to dry, and then once that's dry, we'll go ahead and get some primer on this. After priming, what I did was prime this black and then did a gray zenithal. So we're going to let this dry a little bit more, and we're going to start putting some paint on this and see if we can give it a little bit of spooky color. Okay, as we keep applying color, it starts to come to life a little bit. Started out with the black prime, gray zenithal highlight. Then I've taken some progressively lighter grays and sponged them on all over. I cut in around the eyes where I messed that up. Where I had the tape over it and couldn't prime it. And then I started to pick out the teeth first with a nutmeg, and then with a tan I'm going to build up to kind of a off-white color. And we will do some dry brushing on this, both on the basing and the tree itself. I had one spot that didn't really want to glue down very well. I should have used hot glue there, and like an idiot I put PVA in there, and it may never ever dry, but we'll see. Everything has dried up pretty well on the basing and everything, so I'm going to dry brush this with a light gray all over the base and all over the tree itself. We're going to touch up the teeth, and then we'll add some grass and maybe some other bits. And for this I'm just using a large makeup brush and some light gray paint, and just dry brushing over all of this texture, and that brings it out nicely and gives it kind of almost an ash waste sort of feel. Alright, dry brushed up to white on the tree itself. Went back and picked out the teeth a little bit, dirtied those up, added some tufts and some leaf litter, and I think at this point I'm gonna, and we put our fungus on there. I just super glued those on, and I think at this point I'm gonna call it good. Alright guys, there's our demonic tree finished and ready for haunted woods or possessed woods or any kind of strange woods where you might need a tree like this. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you learned that I'm not a sculptor, and I hope you have a fantastic day.